Welcome back to Wasteland Engineering. In the previous chapters, we talked about different ways of improving our build. We went over the basics of vehicle construction and how to pick the best possible combination of items for our build. If you have yet to view the previous chapters or would like to refresh your memory, you can access the previous chapters through the playlist card above. In this episode of Wasteland Engineering, we will be taking a closer look at Crossout as a player versus player game, and how we can leverage its matchmaking system to further improve our build. In Crossout, all parts have a power score value. This value is assigned to each part by the development team and serves as a rough estimate of how powerful or useful a part is. The matchmaking system in Crossout uses this estimate to find us suitable opponents, based on the assumption that vehicles with similar power scores are comparable to each other. While this system does work on a basic level, it has two major flaws. First is that power score itself is unable to holistically measure the effectiveness of our vehicle. Second is that power score can unintentionally make our weapons more viable or less viable as our vehicle changes. Although power score measures the composition of our vehicle, it is not able to measure how we have built our vehicle or any synergistic effects that we may have incorporated into it. By optimizing our build with proper part placement and synergistic items, we gain a significant advantage over other similar players that have not done the same. For example, let's compare the following two builds. The first build is carefully built around the sinus machine gun. It uses a favorite cabin to dispel heat, two seals to reduce the heat up rate of its weapons, and armor to protect its weapons. The second build also uses the sinus, but is haphazardly constructed. It uses a werewolf cabin that provides no relevant bonuses, an oppressor engine that doesn't synergize with its weapons, and leaves its weapons exposed. From what we have discussed so far in the series, we can see that the first build is the more effective build. However, because the power score of both of our examples are about the same, these two builds could potentially face off against each other in a match. Given that situation, we can confidently say that the first, more optimized build will win the majority of the time. This means that our goal is to not make the best vehicle possible, but to make a vehicle that is better than what our similar opponents have. As weapons increase in rarity, their health, damage, and other attributes improve. These differences can make it difficult for lower rarity weapons to compete with higher rarity weapons. To compensate, higher rarity weapons have higher power score values, theoretically separating them from lower rarity weapons in the matchmaking queue. This presents us with the following dilemma. As we improve our weapons by adding items to our vehicle, we further increase the power score of our build. In doing so, it becomes more likely for us to face similar opponents that have higher rarity weapons, potentially trivializing any improvements we have made. Because of this, adding items to our build can become counterproductive at a certain point. For example, we have created a build around the sledgehammer turreted shotgun. Due to all the items that we have added to our build, our power score is now somewhat high. If we enter the matchmaking queue with this build, it is likely that our opponents will have weapons that are 2 or even 3 rarity levels above ours. As we battle, we will find that our sledgehammers will struggle against our opponents. Even though our vehicle is consciously built to support our weapons, our sledgehammers just don't have the durability or damage to survive against higher rarity weapons. Since fighting builds with higher rarity weapons is usually unfavorable, we want to curtail our building process. We can do this by defining a power score limit for our vehicle. The closer our build is to this power score limit, the more likely that we will encounter builds with higher rarity weapons. Conversely, the further our build is below this limit, the less likely we will have an unfavorable matchup due to rarity. Returning to our example, we can set our current power score as the limit for our sledgehammers. From here, we can decrease the power score of our build until our opponents are using weapons of the same rarity or only one rarity tier higher than ours. It is important to note that each weapon will have its own viability limit. Weapons that have a good baseline performance will be able to compete with higher rarity weapons, resulting in a higher viability limit. Conversely, weaker weapons that struggle within their own rarity tier will have a much lower viability limit. In this episode, we talked about power score and the matchmaking system, and how these systems impact our building process. As we end this episode, we want to keep the following guiding questions in mind. Have I made sure that every item I add to my build serves a purpose? Is my build comparable or better than other similar builds at my current power score? In particular, am I keeping my weapons within their viable power score limit by restricting the number of items I add to my build? That's all for this episode of Wasteland Engineering. In the next episode, we will be taking a look at some commonly found build features. We will discuss why certain features like the wedge are popular and how they work. Thank you for watching, and see you out there in the wasteland.